we have here are all of the rest of the cabinet sides. I have all the fronts and the backs sanded. I have all the dados and rabbets in place, so they're actually all ready to be assembled. The small cabinet that you've seen in the video so far is one small part that actually goes over top of the range. So I have that pretty much done, and I just put a coat of finish on the front of the doors, and once that dries I'll do a couple coats on that. While that's drying, I have all these cabinets, the outside facing up, and I'm going to go ahead and finish all those at the same time. It just makes it a little faster, a little more efficient to do it all at once. So here we go. Now there's a couple of things that you might want to consider when you're doing something like this, is to not lean over your work like you see me doing. If you do that, you might want to consider putting on some clean clothes, because you might introduce dust or whatever like that on top of your work, but I'm not worried about that because I'm cleaned up, and my shirt doesn't have any sawdust on it. That's just one thing to think about when you're laying something like this out. I don't have really a choice, as you can see, to not lean over the work. I mean, I could do half of one side and walk around and do the other side, but in order to get a nice clean, my last brush strokes are the full length of the panel. And so I wouldn't be able to do that without reaching across the whole panel. Now on the end, I could very easily do, this. It would reduce some of the reaching, but as you can see, I'm not really concerned about that. I try not to have too much finish on the brush when I'm doing the ends. When I'm doing the edge of a board, I try to brush like this instead of brush like that, because if you brush like this, then it has a tendency to put a bunch of finish on the edge and it'll drip and kind of make a mess of everything. So when I'm doing the edges of the board, I always brush towards the edge. Always make strokes towards the edge of the board, and then my final pass, make sure that the finish is nice and smooth and even. There's no brush strokes on it. Okay, we'll allow that to sit and dry overnight and come back tomorrow. Tomorrow morning it'll be dry. Okay guys, this is day 2, and what I've done so far on day 2, now that the finish is dry on all of the side panels that I'd done yesterday. All of the 8 panels will finish out the rest of the kitchen. All the uppers, lowers again are done. And so what I've done is, every time you put an original finish on a panel, even though it might be really smooth, it always tends to be little wood filaments or wood fibers that kind of stick up over, if you wipe them down, you're going to have little wood fibers that stick up, and those cause ever so slight bumps along the tops of the wood. So when you go to run your hand over top of these, then you're going to feel a little bit of roughness. So what I've done is I've taken some really fine sandpaper and run the orbital sander up and down on these. And to any of you real cabinet makers out there, you're going to scoff at this next statement that I make, but it's worked for me for years. I make sure that my hands are clean and dry before I do this. So no oils on your hands. I sand all the panels down. Just take and wipe with my hand any of the excess sandings from the sander, any dust off of these panels. After I make each wipe, I wipe it off on my clothes. I mean, I've done all this already. I'm just explaining to you what I've done, just to give you some tips that you might try. They do make tack cloths specifically for this, but you know, it's extra money. If you want to spend it, that's a great product, and it's actually really handy. But you know, I've found it over the years just to be real easy to just wipe these down with a good dry hands. My hands are really dry, and so there's no lint on my hands, which you'll find with rags, clean rags. If I do use a rag, it's like an old t-shirt rag. Old t-shirt rags work great, especially if you're on a second coat and you've already sanded these down, so there's actually nothing rough to catch it. But I found that rubbing a rag on a virgin piece of wood that's not had a finish on it yet, you'll have a tendency for lint to actually get caught on the fibers of the wood. So after the first coat, it seals it. They'd also make a sander sealer, but I don't mess with sander sealers. I've just put a first coat on there, sanded it down, and then that is sanded and it's also sealed. My next step is to put another coat on there, and that should be good enough. And so I'm going to go ahead and put another coat on here off camera. The process is the same as what I did yesterday. Okay, so here we are back in the little finishing room here, and back from the box truck, put the last coat of finish on all the rest of the sides for all the rest of the cabinets for the uppers. So what I like to do is finish these and assemble them as much as I can, you know, because we're gonna have to do all this in one day. And that's to take all of the spices and herbs and whatever else is in the existing cupboards out, and then we have to take those cupboards down, and then we have to install these cabinets. So that includes the range, hood, and the whole 9 yards. So having things like hinges and handles already connected to the doors, and having the doors set aside, because when I put the cabinets up, I'm not going to have the doors on the cabinets when I go to install the cabinet shell itself. And they're a lot easier to handle. You don't have the doors flailing around and getting in your way. So I'll have all the doors assembled and ready to go. I'll pre-drill everything and get everything ready to accommodate the screws for the hinges on the cabinet shell itself. That'll be a lot easier. That'll just take just a few minutes to do all that. So that's what I'm doing now. And if you remember, I pre-drilled all the doors, so these hinges are going to go on really fast. Forgot to hit the record button on the last little process that I've done here. So what I've done is I line these cabinets up ahead of time, get all the holes drilled for mounting the doors and hinges on the cabinet shell or face frame. So I have this set up at a 1/2 inch. A 1/2 inch from the edge to the hinge. On each hinge, I'm 7/8 of an inch in from the top, from the edge to the top of the door, and then 7/8 of an inch from the bottom of the door to the bottom of the cabinet frame, face frame. And I get everything lined up, and then I pre-drill holes where the hinge screws are going to go. So I've done that on both sides, and now we're ready to go. This door is ready to mount onto the cabinet. And what I'll do, I'll get the other door put together just like this one. flip the cabinet box or shell on its side, and then put these doors on, line them up, and then I will pre-drill holes just like I did on the back side of this door on the frame of the cabinet. And so then when I go to put this together, all I have to do is line the holes up, put the screws in. And we'll put the other hinge screws in a bag and save those for when we go ahead and mount the doors on the cabinets in their final resting place. The other piece of the puzzle that I need to do is I need to put a little cross piece in here, and that'll mount behind one of these doors, so you'll have to open one before the other. But what that does is it, instead of having a cross piece in here, this will be all open. So that's really easy for maintenance, real easy for getting to whatever it is you want to get to in here. I like that design a lot better than having a cross piece in here, but I've made them both ways. But for right now, I'm just getting these lined up. I'm going to get these holes plumbed in. So what I have to do is align, get my doors exactly where I want them. So we're going 1/2 inch from the back side. The hinges are from the edge. I go in 1/2 inch to the very outside of the hinge. So I'm dropping it in 1/2 inch on top and bottom. And then to get square, I got 7/8 of an inch and 7/8 of an inch there, verifying that I'm square in here, same distance or the same height, and I just go ahead and find center just by eyeballing it. Well, here we are at the last step of the process of actually building the cabinets, and that is to put the centerpiece in here. And that just covers up this crack. And again, the reason for having this strip in here instead of having the vertical strip is to keep this open in here so I can work with the conduit, and there's a vent pipe that comes up in here, and many times when you have the centerpiece, it's in the way. So what we'll do is we're going to put these doors, we're actually going to mount the doors on the cabinet. At least mount this door on the cabinet. So this is going to self-center. When I screw this down to this pre-drilled holes, that's going to suck this door down, and actually the door, as you can see when I push down on this, because these hinges are spring loaded, it brings the door to the left just a little bit. So what I want to do is I want to get this door exactly where it's going to be when it's actually installed, so I know where to center this piece to hide this little crack. That's all that's for. It's just aesthetics. And before I tighten these all the way down, I want to line up the other end and get this screw started, so I still have some flexibility there, so that I can move this other hinge into place over top of the hole. When I drew down this screw tight, watch what happens to the door. It actually moves this way a little bit as it's also moving down. This is the way I make these, is I round off every corner except for the one that's going to be up against the back side of the door. It just comes up square to the back side of the door. So now what I'll do is I'm just going to scribe a light line on the back side of the door. Okay, so I have the one edge here. It's a 90-degree angle. All the rest are chamfered over. I'll set my square up to 1/4 inch, and this is going to be the side against the door. So you'll never see this line that I put on here. This line is just for reference, so I know where to pre-drill. And let's say maybe 1/2 inch from the end, I'll drill my 2 edge holes, the holes on the 2 opposite ends of the board here. Okay, so we're going to divide this in 3 parts so I can have 4 fasteners in here. I have some leftover screws. They always give you extra screws when you buy hardware for hinges and different things. And so I want to make the hole in here the same size as the outside of the thread on the screw. That looks pretty close. How's that for science? Okay, so I'm going to go over there to the drill press and get nice perpendicular holes to the face of this piece of walnut. Now I want to countersink these because they're tapered. I want these to penetrate into the wood just a little bit and just have just a crown of the fastener on top of the wood. So right now it just doesn't look like it belongs. So we'll countersink that just a little bit, and we'll do that by finding a drill bit that is just the width of the top of the head of the screw. Now we're going to make sure we're drilling from the right side. We're just going to indent that just a little bit. I kind of hold the piece of wood loose just so I can let the drill bit kind of center itself. And of course we'll sand that down just a little more. Okay, that's going to fit nicely. The head of the screw just barely rises up over top of the surface of the piece of wood here, but the edge of the screw is actually permeated the board just a little bit. So now that I remove that screw and kind of see how much of a drop that is, or how much I have to cut a vertical channel or vertical wall in the side of that board, in the side of this piece of wood. Alright, I'll check the depth of each one of these to make sure it look right on each side, or on each hole. That looks good. And that one looks good. So now we'll go ahead and I'll sand the board down and get rid of this little feathery piece here on each one of these holes. So that sanding just takes care of that tear out and allows these little guys to fit in there nice and pretty like. Now, one thing I just discovered is that the doors don't hang proper, or they don't hang square unless you put this other screw in. I thought just 2 of these screws would be okay, but I think for better accuracy to get that center, I can't remember if it's called a stile or a rail. I think it's a stile. And a little shadow board that I'm going to put in there. I think putting all these screws in here is going to be a safe bet. Okay, I'm going to favor this door just a little bit more, just to give us some more surface area for the back side, so it's not just barely on here. And this will give an opportunity for the screws to penetrate a little bit deeper into the door. Deeper meaning this way. 5/8. 5/8 it is. And so you have plenty covering here. You have about 3/8 of an inch of coverage. So when both the doors are closed, all you'll see is this piece of walnut in here. So now I'm going to double check my lines again. So we're going to go down 5/8 of an inch. So that's where the back side is going to be. So that is how that is going to set. Now when I take these out, I try to be mindful of every time you put these screws in and take them out, you're kind of wearing out the hole a little bit. So try not to do this too much. The line that I put down or scribed on the back side of the cabinet, there's just going to be a little bit of space in between the edge of this board and that line. And I did that, I cut it just a little bit shy for a reason, so there's a little bit of play in there. And then I'm back 5/8 of an inch. Okay, now you can see how that's going to fit in there. A little bit of play in here. So there's going to be a little shadow in between these two connections, or these 2 points here. But you'll never see that when the door is closed. So other than putting a little bit of a finish on here, that's ready. And the only reason I didn't put a finish on it right away is because Heidi's working on this video right now. But I want to get this particular portion of the process completed for you guys, so you guys can see what's going on, so she can finish out this video. And but what I'll do is I'll take that back off, put a finish on it, and let it dry overnight, and then remount it. So I got one more cabinet box glued up inside the dry room in there. It's ready to be unclamped now, and now I have to put fascia, or the face of the cabinet on there with this walnut, build the doors. While that is going on, I can get that other cabinet box glued up and have it drying. So there's kind of goes in stages. So I'm working on these cabinets kind of in between projects, so it's still taking a little bit of time to get it all put together. So Heidi's pretty anxious to get that done, and I am too. I want to get this project behind me. Anyways, thanks for stopping by. Take care, and God bless.